So I think in the interests of getting started with Kait on time, I'll use this opportunity to introduce myself and Deanne. I'm Will Gawned. I am the UKRN Community Project Manager. We're working very closely with local network leads this year. And these workshops are part of the program of activities that we're including. I've been with UKRN since 2019. As an administrator, this year I'm in the role of project manager for this project. Deanne, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Deanne Hurd. I'm a plant molecular biologist by training. I joined UKRN last summer. I'm working with Will on this project. I'm the project coordinator.
Thank you. And I will let everyone know this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be made publicly available, just the first half an hour of it with Kait's presentation. There is then discussion after that where we will turn off the recording, but just so you're all aware that that is the case. I think if you leave your camera off and don't speak, you won't appear in the recording anywhere if that is an issue, but also feel free to email us ukrnadmin@bristol.ac.uk if you have any concerns around that. It is now 5 past the hour, so I will pass over to Kait Clark, who is running this student consortia online workshop. Please take it away, Kait.
Thanks so much, Will. And thanks everyone for coming. We're going to start off just with a brief 20-minute overview. I have some very boring slides to just guide us through the basics of what this looks like. So we're all kind of on the same page in terms of what do we mean when we're talking about a student consortium project? What are some of the practical things that we have to consider? And then there will be a brief 5-minute question session to clear anything up. After that, in the second half of today's workshop, I'd like to actually start having a conversation about potentially a new consortium and if people are interested in joining together to create a student project together that would run next year. So I'm just going to share my screen to get these slides up here. Great. And I'm assuming everybody can see my slides now. All good. Cool. So this really comes out of a desire to transform the undergraduate dissertation for several reasons, because historically there have been a number of problems with how undergraduate dissertations have been run. And I'm coming from a psychology background, but these problems are not specific to psychology, and you will see this across disciplines. The reality is that at the undergraduate level, the students are obviously at that stage in their careers quite naive about the research process and really what it involves. They haven't been involved in a full research project for the most part by the time they reach their final year of university. So they often have great intentions, but they don't quite have the background to develop a high quality research question. So they end up having some ideas that either aren't practical or aren't valuable to pursue. The supervisors kind of then have to work with them to create something that works with their idea. And you end up having a massive administrative burden on the supervisors trying to get a project up and running that maybe isn't what they want to be doing otherwise. Then you end up having a lot of data collected on a lot of low quality projects. They're rarely published. And so this ends up just being a lot of research waste. So what we're trying to do is solve this problem. And instead of having all of this research waste, actually have a high quality project, involve the students in that process, and pull our resources together to have a better product overall. So a consortium project, when I use this phrase consortium project, I'm referring to a collaborative approach to supervision that involves bringing the students into a real research project, the kind of things that we would normally collaborate on together, actually getting the students involved in the kind of work we want to be doing anyway. And there's lots of reasons that we want to do this. We certainly would prefer to have a single high quality project versus many low quality projects with our students. We have access to more data. So in psychology, we often have participant pools, and if we're looking at multiple universities, we have access to more participant pools, so we potentially have more statistical power with the opportunity to reach more participants. By having this one larger high quality project, we have an increased chance of publication. We have a better experience for students as well, because the reality is that when students pursue these kind of little pet projects, it ends up being really stressful for them. Nothing really comes out of it, and they get such a better experience when they actually get to be involved in doing something meaningful and contributing to real research. And a lot of students actually end up getting research assistantships, going on to masters and PhDs from their experience on these consortium projects. This type of work is also more manageable for supervisors because you're sort of just running one larger project and having all of your students in a group, rather than trying to deal with all of these individual tiny projects, programming a million different experiments, getting all different questionnaires set up with all different students. You're streamlining your work to pull everything into one bigger project. We also get to form new collaborative relationships. So by developing a consortium project, we can all work together, we can build new collaborations, and ultimately we can advance research because we'll be doing a project that will actually make a meaningful contribution. So some of the practical things we need to consider with this is that in order to involve our students on this, for the most part, we need to have within our programs an expectation that the students conduct an empirical dissertation project. So this is the expectation in psychology and some other disciplines, but it's not always the case. So there are some disciplines where the students are expected to not really collect data, but just like write a literature review. In that case, it's really difficult to involve the students on this because it's not their expectation that they would be conducting a real research project. You normally would have to have some kind of supervisor selection process where you have a preconceived idea that is advertised to the students in some way, or some expectation that the students are wanting to work with you because you're working on a particular topic area. So rather than just a kind of free-for-all dissertation allocation process where students are randomly put with someone and might want to pursue their own idea, it makes it much easier if within your department there's some kind of selection process that the students are expecting to work with you within a particular research area. There can be differences in the timescales for submission dates at different universities, when the students are assigned to you, when the students submit their ethics, when they actually submit their projects. And so this is just one of the things that as a group, we need to look at when are these things happening at the different universities so that we can coordinate how that time scale will work for us as a whole. There's also, in psychology at least, there's an expectation that students will submit ethics as part of their BPS requirements for our professional body. So even though there's one larger project, and so we'll be using the same, consent form, information sheet, and so forth, there is a kind of separate administrative task that usually each of the student groups at individual universities will also need to submit an internal ethics. And one of our other requirements, so there's different requirements at different universities, but for us, for example, if students are involved in a group project, in a larger project, they are also supposed to have their unique individual research questions. And so that's usually what this looks like, that there's one larger project with a lot of different research questions, potentially a lot of different variables, and each student involved in the project will have ownership over a small slice of the larger project. So they may be focusing on one or two particular variables, even though we're collecting data on a lot more, for example. So to do this, what we do is we first need to establish the research team. So who of us are going to be involved in a consortium? What is our research question going to be? Once we have that at least a bit of a general idea of a topic area, we then, through our own internal processes within our own departments, recruit the students to the team. We'll then have the initial project administration where we are developing the materials, pre-registering the study, and starting to devise the ethics. Now, depending on timescales and depending on the student expectations and your expectations, the students may be involved in this to varying degrees. So they may be involved in the pre-registration process, which can be really good for them developmentally. They might be involved in, helping us to create the materials, determining, what questionnaires we want to use or what experimental paradigms we want to use, for example. There are collaborative meetings, so we'll have large and small group supervision. We may have meetings as a large group with the supervisors and the students, and then individual supervisors with their students. For the data collection and analysis over the course of the year, normally the supervisors will support their individual students for their individual analyses, whatever their particular questions are. And often the data collection may extend beyond student submissions. So this is what typically happens because they only have so much time before they have to analyze all their data and submit their dissertation. A lot of the times we haven't actually reached our target sample size by that point. So that's fine for the student purposes. They're able to use the data we have so far for their write-up, but then we as a team can continue collecting data for the actual paper. And then the team of supervisors usually has shared writing responsibilities for the final manuscript. So there's a couple of different forms this can take, and it's pretty easy to just set up a mini consortium within your own university. So if you have a person or persons that you want to collaborate with and have a project idea and you want to get some students on it to help with data collection, you can work with one or more supervisors within your department and university and have the students sign up to that collaborative project if that's what your process is for advertising the supervisors to students. In this case, it's usually entirely co-supervised. Because you're at the same university, because you're governed by the same timelines and the same process, you can have group supervision sessions where both supervisors or 3 or more supervisors meet with all of the students involved. In this case, each student is technically allocated to a single supervisor. Usually because on the systems, you have to have one individual. And that person may have some individual responsibilities like draft review, but overall, most of the supervision might happen entirely combined. Sorry, I'm just having some technical issues with slide advancing, so apologies for the awkward pauses here. There we go. So then there's also the larger consortium projects, and so this is cross-university. Now, with this, you're looking at 2 or more supervisors at multiple universities or departments. So typically, each supervisor will have a group of students, and that can range really from 1 to 8 students. It's usually 2 to 5 students is a good amount. And I should clarify that not all of your students have to be on this one project, right? So if you have a responsibility to take 8 students every year, for example, that's what I have, right? So I have to take 8 undergraduate students every year. Now, I never put 8 students on one project. I find that's a little bit too much of students at one university on a single project. So normally I have 2 or 3 projects that I supervise, and I have 2 to 5 students on each of those. At this point, I run entirely consortium projects. So every single undergraduate project I run is either a mini consortium within my own university or a larger one. And these have developed over the years, and I have a couple students on each of them that are then kind of part of a bigger team, either within my university or across universities. So with these larger consortium projects, this would typically involve a mix of meetings. So the early development stages would be all the supervisors, everybody having a Zoom meeting to decide what is our research question, how are you going to approach this, what are the basics that we're going to do. And then we'll have the initial administration, so developing the materials, the pre-registration and so forth. That can be all of us with all of our students. Then we might have some individual meetings with our own students to, work on their internal ethics, for example. Then throughout the year, we'll have the data collection, which will involve the individual supervisors meeting with their own students. So we kind of separate from the larger group to deal with their individual supervision, the support they need for their own research questions, and so forth. And then the final write-up, after they all submit, we come back together as a team to work out our plan for writing up. And we can sometimes actually involve the super keen students in this. So a lot of students will just want to move on after their dissertation. They'll be happy to be acknowledged, but they're not really keen to be part of the publication process. But some super keen students may want to be involved and actually contribute to the writing at that stage. So an example of several consortium projects that sort of have been conducted over the years is this preprint here. Charlotte Pennington, also on this call, is on this project, and this was actually a result of 2 different consortium projects over the years. So this was initially started by Lee DeWitt, and what we wanted to look at was students' understandings and perceptions of open research, and how statistics, anxiety, and understanding influences how students perceive questionable research practices, responsible research practices, and so forth. So the way that Lee had set this up initially was that there were a group of supervisors at different universities, each with actually just one student in this case. And each student kind of devised their own question of what they wanted to look at. We combined a bunch of questionnaires and put them together. And that became what is now study 1 in this preprint. We then kind of took a more directed consortium approach the next year and worked with Katie Gilligan Lee as part of another project that she was running, if you're familiar with STORM, the study of open research methods, to look at some more focused questions following on from the exploratory work in study 1. When we recruited students to look at statistics, anxiety, and understanding, we collected data from undergraduate students at multiple universities. So we collected it at UWI, at University of Bristol with Nick Scott Samuel, and at Aston with Charlotte Pennington. And then this is now the result of a couple of years of work and a couple different studies all coming together for one publication. So that is an overview and kind of general idea of what I'm talking about in terms of consortiums, but I'm sure there are different questions. So I'll open it up to the room now, and I'm happy to answer or discuss any of this in more detail.